And in the discussion section, like in the results and discussion section, we have identified some of the like results and some kind of findings, which we have to say that this is in conformity with the previous research work, or else this is in contradiction to the previous research work, or else it is saying like it is something new, which is not there in the previous literature. Like that, you can say that because literature review is a comprehensive thing. It is not only focusing on one chapter. The way you are going to review the literature, it is not only focusing on only one chapter about literature review. It also includes the several others, including from introduction to the results and discussion. Even in conclusion, sometimes we put some kind of literature. So what is this literature review? Primarily, but this definition is pertaining to the literature review section. So it's a written summary about the journal articles, books, and other documents that describe the past and the current state of information on the topic of the research study. It organizes literature into subtopics, documents needed for the proposed study. So that means that if you take the literature review chapter, it is basically a kind of summary. But technically, we don't follow in a summary form because we are writing one by one. We are identifying the broad topic and the subtopics in the literature review, and each and every subtopic we are arranging in some kind of order, alphabetical order or year-wise. Like we are arranging, this person has told like this, this person has told like this. This is the way we are following the literature review. But this kind of literature review, that system is slowly vanishing in many of the premier institutions, and it is not there in many other institutions. It is followed only in agricultural universities and the other places, where nowadays we are going into a kind of a theoretical framework. I think you might have heard about this word, theoretical framework, conceptual framework. Instead of a literature review section, we are going into a theoretical framework section. Actually, when I was doing my PhD in Odisha Agriculture University, that was during 2005 to 2009. So I systematically removed the literature review section. There is no literature review section in my research work. Only the chapter you will be seeing is the theoretical framework. Theoretical framework is something, because my work was focusing on theory building. So you have to give a complete theoretical understanding. It is like a complete write-up. It is not one by one. It is like a complete descriptive write-up, which I have given in my theoretical framework. So that is one way of writing literature review. But it is always better that you follow the method, the way your university is suggesting, because sometimes the external examiner may reject your thesis if you don't do the literature review properly. But a theoretical framework is an emerging area where instead of literature review, we are going into theoretical framework or conceptual framework. So why we are doing the literature review? We are using the literature review predominantly to select the research problem. So sometimes we put the research problem and then we substantiate the research problem, because I told there are 5 different elements in the research problem. To arrive at these 5 different elements, at least 3 of them require the thorough review of literature. Then only you will be able to develop a good research problem. So why we are doing is, you are writing your research problem, you are getting the references to support your research problem. The template number 3, deficiencies in the current system, evidence, deficiencies in the current evidence, the template number 3, there you have to quote the previous literature. That is strengthening your research problem. Second one is sources of criticism, to provide the counter argument to the idea and helps in modifying the idea. Suppose if some traditional practice is happening, some people have criticized it. You should not do like this. It is not the right way of doing it. So if you want to use the same kind of perspective, you can use those criticisms also in your literature review. And the literature review, when you are reading, making the literature review, you will be getting so many ideas. Like you might have already identified the research problem, but based on literature review, you will get different ideas. I will give from my example during my PhD, because most of them you are all from academic line. So I'm giving example from academic perspective. So when I selected my research problem, like a factors influencing the computer use behavior of the extension personnel in extension organizations. It is a KVK or Atma or state government departments. So this is my research topic. So I developed the research problem, like if money has to be invested for providing individual computers, anybody who is investing money, they will ask that how much the computer will be used, because it's a kind of, you have to answer the audit people. Okay, so I prepared one thing, and I decided that I will go for simple ANOVA and regression, and I will collect some data based on in conventional way what we do in extension, like a scientific orientation and other kind of innovativeness kind of scales and the socio-economic scale, everything I will develop and I will do it. But what happened, I after presenting my synopsis, not synopsis, my research plan in my PhD, I got an exposure towards the IIT. Incidentally, my wife was doing PhD in IIT, so IIT Kharagpur. So I used to go there, and by the time I got exposed to different kind of researches conducted in IIT. So I came across one method called structural equation modeling. It was in 2006. So that was in IIT, people used to almost in management science, no, in MBA, this is compulsory. They have to use structural equation modeling. So then I learned about the technique. So then I thought that it is a very interesting technique. And when I collected some literature, I was doing literature review in IIT Kharagpur. So then I downloaded the paper. When I saw that there is very few papers, international papers in the conventional way of doing our extension way of doing the literature. I found that there are many papers when I got it, the same problem. My research problem is somebody wants to invest money in extension organizations like a extension supervisor or the in charge of the extension agency or the in charge of KVK. They want the Atari director. That time there was no Atari, but ZPD, the Zonal Project Directorate was there. They want to invest some money, means they want to see that how much of the computer will be used. The same kind of research problem, when I was doing literature review, they went for a complex mathematical modeling, like a structural equation modeling. There are innumerable number of papers. I will say that even more than 100, 120 papers in 2006 I downloaded on structural equation modeling applied in the same research problem which I selected. Then I thought, like, why can't I use this methodology? Because this is the most appropriate method of doing the research. Like, because it is already used in the same problems elsewhere, but not in India. It was used in several USA, UK, and other countries, but not in India. Then I tried to learn the method. I got one book on structural equation modeling, photostat, from one of my wife's friend from psychology department. Then she also gave me one software called Amos version 4. And it was in a floppy. That time, no, not floppy, CD. There was no pen drive that time. So that CD, I took it and I took the Xerox, the booklet, and then I also read the papers and I started learning about this structural equation modeling. And it is not because of it is a very complex methodology. It is a most appropriate methodology for solving my research problem, which I identified through the literature review. So, but when I submitted my thesis, my original idea of approaching the research problem, and the time I got to know about this kind of structural equation modeling during the literature review, I implemented in my research work. Finally, my thesis has become very bulky and it is full of statistics. From the chapter number 2 to chapter number 9, anybody who is reading, I think some of you might have read my research, like it is already there in online. So in chapter number 3 onwards, it is full of statistics. But finally, I could identify a very useful research methodology for my research problem. So literature review has completely changed my research, the way I conducted the research. So that's what I mean to say. It is very, very important that where you are doing literature review. Most of the times, what the students used to do earlier, they used to send it to MS Swaminathan Foundation, some abstracts will come and they do use it. Or else also they will be going into some kind of abstracting software, sorry, portals, and they download the abstract and do it. Nowadays, even Sarah JGate is there. Now using Sarah also, they are downloading. But when you are looking at the kind of downloading the abstract and doing it, how you are going to arrange those literature. In the beginning, we used to write a small cards. Some small cards are there where we go to dissertation, international abstract books. Big books will be there in library. We used to go there. We identify the relevant topic. We see so many pages. There was no such kind of thing that time. So only the relevant abstracts we used to write in the card. And then the similar cards we used to group it. Then we prepare one statement for writing the research problem. But nowadays you are having a much better softwares are available. But this is the standard way of collecting literature for your thesis work. So, but by doing this, if you are downloading only abstracts, you will not be getting a new perspective. You have to download the research papers and you read the research papers. Whenever you are reading more and more number of research papers, your idea of conducting research will be drastically improved. You will have a different perspective of conducting the research. And then that is a source of new ideas and the context. A literature review set up the context on which the research problem is happening and interdisciplinary insight. And when you are doing literature, one example I can tell about the traditional knowledge. I think traditional knowledge, I think some of you may be working like a documentation of the ITK, indigenous traditional knowledge, and then doing rationality assessment and the validation of the ITK. There is a research methodology. Okay. But when I was interested to learn about but I have not done much work on ITK, but I documented a lot of ITKs. Like from Northeast, we have documented around 200 indigenous recipes and ITKs. And I published one paper out of it, and I also presented in one conference. And we brought 2 booklets of the indigenous recipes because I followed a systematic methodology like prior informed consent and other things. I have followed it. But ITK, when you are documenting ITK, when I was reading papers in indigenous traditional knowledge ITK, so there are very different kind of methods are there for interpreting, like documenting and analyzing ITKs. We don't analyze ITKs. We simply go for rationality assessment, and we that is called a part of the validation of the ITK. Then finally we go for the adoption of ITK by the tribal people. So otherwise ITK, farmers' knowledge, farmers' practices, farmers' innovations, all these things, we simply document it and we do some rationality assessment, and we also do some kind of adoption. This is the traditional way of dealing with ITK. But when I was reading the papers in Indian traditional knowledge and other papers published in other countries, they use different methods, different kind of validation method. There is a terminology called scientization. So that means that when you are reading literature review, you are expanding your domain. Like you can integrate very new kind of tools and techniques. Even ITK documentation, different kind of tools are there. ITK assessment, I think rationality is something which is used only in our India and other countries. In abroad, they don't go for rationality validation of the ITKs. They directly go for field validation of the ITKs. And there is a quick method, QUIK method, quantifying indigenous knowledge. So actually quick method, I used it some 15-20 years back, we have used it. But nowadays quick method should be used for designing your validation experiment, not for rationality assessment. Over the years, the same method which we used for designing the field experiments, because there was an ITK project. It was in, I think, 2003-4 NADP ITK project, where a lot of ITKs were documented and they were validated in field experiments. So for designing the field experiments, we used the quick method. But nowadays, the quick method is used for some kind of rationality assessment or some kind of conceptual kind of validation. That is not the case. A quick method should be used only for actual experimentation, like a farmer's practice, your practice, and the university practice. You have to actually validate for 2 seasons, means 2 years. You generate the data, efficacy data, then that has to be checked it. That is a way of doing the validation. So when you read more and more, your knowledge or your thing will be expanded. You will be getting a different kind of perspective. That is the beauty of the literature review. And you will also get the interdisciplinary insight. I can give from my example, like I was explaining about ITK. So we documented the ITK. There is an ITK called, there is a crop called yam. Okay, yam is like a suran, elephant foot yam kind of thing. So that ITK says that if you are treating the yam with the yam tubers, means small tubers with the cow dung, it induces the sprouting. Okay, that is an ITK. So what we did it, we used the quick method, and you have to make a yam cow dung treatment with some Bevestin. We made 2 or 3 treatments there, and you have to put it in, spread in the sand. Means you have to actually put the tubers inside the sand. Then there, apart from doing the documentation of the ITK as an extension scientist, I was also asked to validate doing some field experiments in the farmers field. I was actually doing field experiment there. As though I am an extension scientist, I did the field experiment because this work, the ITK project, has to be done when you are documenting it and again designing the experiment as well as analyzing the data using ANOVA and other things. You have to do it. That means that you have to integrate your expertise, because I strongly says that though there are papers published in extension journal, because we have very top class journal in India, but unfortunately they are focusing only on extension. See, we are all forgetting that we are basically agricultural graduates. We are basically veterinary graduates. We are basically fishery graduates. We are science students learning social science. But unfortunately, in our extension research, we are focusing only on social science, forgetting the science. You have to integrate yourself, because I have done chromatography and you might have done it, PCR, everything. And in undergraduate courses, I did PCR long back, like a gas chromatography, we did it. We did hands-on experience. We also interpreted the data. We also did GCMS. Okay, everything, whatever the food technology or other people are doing, we have already done it in our bachelor's course. So that means that we are a science graduates. We are basically an agricultural graduates venturing into social science. If you don't integrate your social science with agriculture, you will be nowhere. You will be isolated. You will be separated from the total mainstream. So you have to bring a kind of interdisciplinary insight into your research. And again, in general, the purpose of literature is to establish the need for the study, and you will also get different dimensions of the research, and it builds your research skills, and also it will help you to locate the needed materials. I think most of you are using the SERA or some other local search databases for collecting the literature. And there is another method called systematic review. I will just give some examples of systematic review. Systematic review is a literature review method, but where you can publish research papers. So we are now in the new syllabus. You might have heard about the meta-analysis. No, meta-analysis is there in your new curriculum. Probably in the PhD curriculum it is there. And meta-analysis, systematic review, all these things are coming under one broad category, that is called research synthesis. Research synthesis is an area where, based on the previously published research, you are trying to make some generalization from the previously published research. That you are not conducting any research. You are collecting the information and other things from the previously published research, and you are trying to generalize the statements, make some generalized statement. That is called research synthesis. Meta-analysis, systematic review, all are part of the research synthesis. Some techniques of the research synthesis. I think it is already there in your PhD. Meta-analysis, research synthesis, all these things are there. You may have to learn those things. And how you are doing literature review for qualitative research and quantitative research. So in quantitative research, your literature review will be substantial. But qualitative research, it is minimal. Why? Anybody can tell why we are not doing much literature review in qualitative research, but we are doing more and more in quantitative research? Any reactions from the students? What is the reason?
Many things.
You can type it. Suppose if you don't want to speak, you can type it. Why we are going for more literature review in quantitative research, but not in qualitative research? Qualitative research, literature review is very minimum. Why? Any idea, anyone?
Sir,
Any idea? Okay, Rama Devi, she says that it supports our findings. Okay, that means that you are looking at the discussion component, because literature review is used in all levels: introduction, literature review section, methodology, and results and discussions. To support your finding mean it is results and discussion. Okay, let me tell you, in qualitative research, I think I am repeatedly talking about the research goals. Research goals are very, very important in social science. You have to be thorough with the research goals. If you don't understand research goals, you don't understand the social science research at all. So there are 5 research goals I explained: description, exploration, explanation, prediction, and application. Okay. In qualitative research, your research question has no prior published research. Means that you don't have much of the previously published researchers in qualitative research designs. That means that you are trying to explore new areas or new dimensions. For one example is we are talking about like a farm laws. Like a government has introduced the farm laws, and there was a lot of protest against the farm laws from farmers. Finally, it is withheld. It is not completely withdrawn. It is withheld. Okay, so that means that if somebody wants to know about how the farmers are reacting to or perceiving about the farm laws, so there is no previously literature for such kind of things. So that means that you have to go for a qualitative research. That means that by default in qualitative research, you will be having a very less number of papers published in the previous one. I think somebody has raised hands. Can you speak?
yes, sir.
Anyone want to discuss? Okay, then these are the key differences. Literature review will be very less in qualitative research, substantial in quantitative research. In quantitative research, we are using the literature for justifying the need for the study, justifying the problem, research problem, and also it also provides a rationale for the direction of the study. Based on the previous literature review, you can develop the rationale for the study. The purpose of using literature at the end of the study means for the results and discussion, it confirms or disconfirms the previous predictions of the literature. But in qualitative research, it supports or modifies the existing findings in the literature. So these are the 2 different areas, different purposes for which we are doing either a qualitative or quantitative literature review in qualitative or quantitative research. So how to conduct a literature review? First one is you have to identify the key terms, like your search terms. What are the different terms? Normally it is given if you see any similar research paper, every research paper has some key terms, and every see the abstract, dissertation international or any abstracts also they have key terms. But the key terms you have to derive for your own research work. Like you have to identify the key terms from your research project title. This project title or from the research questions and the objectives. You have to identify the search terms from your title, from your research questions, or from your objectives. So you have to use those kind of terms for searching your literature in any kind of database. Then you have to identify the relevant literature using the different search terms from the different databases, libraries, and peer-reviewed journals and other digital databases. And once you collected the literature, you have to critically evaluate, and you have to include only the relevant and accurate literature from credible sources. But one thing which I want to explain here, most of the times in your MSc, you are quoting unpublished thesis. Probably like if you are using more number of papers from references from unpublished thesis, it is going to create a problem for you while you are publishing the research paper. See, and I have seen in many theses, especially MSc and PhD thesis, the scales are taken from the unpublished thesis. That is a totally wrong. That is a blunder. You should not use the scales from the unpublished thesis work. Suppose if the thesis is published as a research paper in some journal, you can use it. But unpublished thesis work, and I will suggest that the thesis, unpublished thesis, is not a peer-reviewed material. So if you want to publish an international paper, or if you want to publish some paper in some good quality journals in India, if you are quoting the scales and other things from an unpublished thesis, your reviewer will straight away reject your work. So please don't use the scales from the unpublished work. And then 90% of you people use these scales like a scientific orientation and a three-party socioeconomic scale. These are all the things which are taken from unpublished thesis. Dr. Samantha's scale, it is an unpublished thesis. If it is a published thesis, then only it is considered as a peer-reviewed journal. You have to, suppose you want to, if you want to use the scales developed by Dr. Samantha, or if you want to use the scales developed by Dr. Tripathi, they might have published some research papers. You have to take quote the research paper, not the thesis work. Okay, so this is very, very important. If you are using the because the scales form the heart of your research work. When you are making a research paper, the scales are the different artilleries of your heart. So if your heart is taken from the artilleries are taken from some unpublished or which is considered as not as a peer-reviewed journal, so there is a likelihood that especially the international journals, your paper will be rejected straight away at the editor's desk. It will not be published at all. It will not be even reviewed. So please use the references, especially the critical cases like the scales and other things, only from published sources, that to published in a peer-reviewed journal. Peer-reviewed journal means the journal, when you are submitting a paper to a journal, that the paper will be sent to 2 or 3 reviewers. They will give a comments, and based on that, you have to modify the paper. Only that is called peer-reviewed journal. Thesis is not a peer-reviewed material. Thesis is reviewed by only one person, one external examiner. So that is not an accepted material at all. Unpublished thesis is not an accepted material. Okay, then you organize the literature into systematically, then you write the literature review. The first step is to identify the strategy. Suppose if your research title is like impact of frontline demonstrations on low glycemic index rice variety on its adoption by these small farmers in Trivandrum district, Kerala, India. Suppose if this is the title, so you have to select the combination of keywords. You can see that low glycemic index rice variety, India plus impact. Or I can use this low glycemic index rice variety, frontline demonstrations, impact, India. Okay, this is a frontline demonstration, impact, low glycemic rice variety, India. I am not putting Trivandrum because review of literature will have a larger domain, not only on one specific domain. So from your title, you have to select from your title or from your objectives, you have to select the terms for doing literature review. And this is basically systematic review. In systematic review, what we do is, in systematic review, you have to follow the standard search databases. Nowadays, in India, we have access only to SERA database. Okay, but if you want to do the systematic literature review, you have to use some standard database. SERA is not considered. Maybe the Indian journal may consider SERA as a database, but in foreign journals, SERA may not be considered as a database. In foreign journals, they will consider Web of Knowledge, Scopus, okay, then Medline, ProQuest, and then Informa World, or maybe there are a few more, JSTOR, and Emerald and Ibisco. These are all the different databases where you can get the journals. If you want to publish systematic review, you have to use only these databases. You cannot, otherwise simply you can collect it and put it in your literature review section. There is no problem. But systematic review, I will show you on paper how the systematic review is done. There you can, even the systematic review you can publish directly as a paper. For that, you need to collect data from the established databases. But unfortunately, only some institutes have access to those databases. We don't have all our agriculture. We don't have access. Only the IITs and IIMs and other engineering colleges and the management institutions are having a database access. If you want to publish systematic review, you need to collect the data, the literature from them. And these are the different degrees of material, relevancy of the materials, what we do. See, early stage material, because when you are putting the search in Google, no, in Google, there will be lots and lots of material you will be getting it. You will be getting from research paper, you will be getting from your thesis, you will be getting from some reports, you will be getting from some websites, some blogs, everything. So many kind of literature you will be getting it. So how to classify those materials? Early stage material means any papers, preprints, can be there, early stage material or draft of the paper for conference presentation. They are all called as an early stage material. Indexed publications are called as conference papers, dissertations, thesis, professional association papers. They are all indexed publications. Journal articles are peer-reviewed, referenced, refereed, non-referenced, international, national, and regional level. Books, there will be books like research studies, essays, and summaries, encyclopedias, research reviews. Okay, so these are all the different degrees of the papers which you will be getting it. Okay, so if you look at that summaries, they are of high standard. Means summaries, research reviews means including the systematic reviews, meta-analysis, all are summaries mean they have compiled information from several papers. And the ideas that appear in 10 plus years after the initiation. That means that that summaries can be produced only after long-term research. Then books, journal articles, indexed publication, and early materials. So these are the different kind of material. Whenever you are searching the database, you will be getting it. But I will suggest you, when you are going for a literature review and if you want to publish a good paper in some journal, you focus only on the research articles which are published in peer-reviewed journals and any book chapters, or else any kind of patents or any other blog. Don't go for blogs. Blogs, unpublished thesis, and any reports prepared by some draft kind of reports. These things, you please avoid it. You please avoid them totally from your literature review, because these are all not considered as a standard literature for any journals. And a systematic review, I told you, PubMed, ProQuest, Scopus, Science Direct, Web of Science, Wiley, PLOS One, okay, and then Site Seek, and there are many, Proline, there are so many kind of databases are there. For systematic review, you have to collect data from these databases. Okay, at this stage, I will stop here. I will show you on paper, systematic review paper. I think you are seeing this paper, no? rural tourism, a systematic literature review on definition challenges. Okay, this paper was published in a Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Management, but it is more relevant to extension, rural tourism. They want to identify what different definitions of tourism, rural tourisms are proposed by several sources. By the paper, they are focusing on definitions they have taken and did this review. So I will straight away go to the methodology, how it was done. See, they have done search from Science Direct, Scopus, Web of Science, Sage, Ibisco, Host, Emerald Insight, and ProQuest. So these are all the number of papers they have identified in the initial search. Because you have to identify the keywords. Now, if you put the keywords in that Science Direct or Scopus everywhere, you will get this many number of papers. So they will be putting some inclusion and exclusion criteria. They will be putting that any paper which is published prior to 1990 will not be accepted. Okay, they will be removing, and they will be saying like the papers which are pertaining to developing countries will be taken, developed countries will be removed. So they are identifying some kind of search criteria, and they filter it. After applying the search criteria, they are getting in Science Direct from 640 to 62. It is reduced. So they have taken totally 858 papers were downloaded in systematic review. And there may be duplicates because you are downloading from multiple databases. No, like a Science Direct and Scopus may have the same paper. So you have to remove the duplicates. After removing duplicates, they are getting 237 full papers. I'm not talking about abstracts. And they are screening 237 and they excluded 19 because which are not relevant. So it is coming to 218 full text articles. And again they are screening it for some criteria. 103 articles were removed. Finally, they have eligible studies for systematic reviews, 115. And again, they have taken 125. The additional records they added at 10. So they followed the Prisma method. There is a method called the Prisma method, which is used for developing the systematic review. They use the Prisma method, and now how they interpreted the data, you can see. They plotted these papers based on geographical region. 14 papers from Spain, 13 from Portugal, United Kingdom. So these are the different papers, geographical region wise. Means whatever the total number of papers they have selected, they plotted in different geographical region. And you can see here emerging themes from they read the paper and they identified that how many based on location, rural area, countryside. They read the whole paper. From there, they have identified the themes. The themes means something which is more broadly representing it. You have to go for little bit of thematic analysis at this level. You can see so many themes they identified. These are the different themes. So local participation is one theme. These are all the papers which are dealing with the local participation. Integrated stakeholder. These are the papers which are having integrated stakeholder. Physical experience. Like they are all the different dimensions of the rural tourism. They are trying to define rural tourism based on the systematic review. They want to bring out their own definition. Like a planning and management is one dimension, marketing strategy is another dimension, social experience is one dimension, financial is another dimension. How many number of papers they are mentioning financial? The frequency they have written, 9.92 means 23 numbers. So the author wise, themes and authors, they have done it. Then you can see they explained like a different areas they identified the experience. They have taken the papers which are dealing with experience and they try to generalize the findings from their paper. Whatever given in the paper related to the experience, rural tourism is equivalent to some kind of experience. They did some kind of write-up. It's a synthesis. They read the paper and they made a synthesis out of it. And they identify the comparative analysis. You can see different dimensions and how many number of papers mentioned those dimensions: location dimension, community, sustainable development dimension, community dimension, and experience dimension. It is all, they are all dealing with only one concept called rural tourism. Rural tourism. And they identified different themes. In location, these all different themes are coming. In sustainable development, these themes are coming. This is a qualitative research study. They used to thematic analysis, but they have done it in a systematic review. So these are the definition themes and the challenge themes. So based on this, see, they compiled it. See, what are all the different kind of definitions they have identified and what is the exact definition. So what they did is they have collected, they want to identify the different dimensions of the rural tourism as mentioned in the previous research works. To come out with the definition of this rural tourism, they have taken different dimensions of the rural tourism, and finally they could identify some 5 or 6 dimensions which are already indicated in the flow chart. You can see location dimension, sustainable development dimension, community-based aspect dimension, experience dimension, internal challenges dimension, and external challenges dimension. So they identified and they made sub-dimensions also. They suppose what is the utility of this paper is, whenever if somebody wants to do the literature review, if they want to go for a systematic way of doing literature review, these dimensions you identified at the end of your literature review will be your variables. These are all your variables in your questionnaire. So instead of going for a judges rating, instead of going for a previous literature review, judges rating and others, you can go for a qualitative kind of analysis using the systematic review. Okay, you download the papers, you arrange the content in a systematic form in different themes. From the different themes, this location, for example, if you want to measure the rural tourism satisfaction, about the satisfaction of the rural tourism experience by a customer, the location dimension, if you want to develop a scale, the rural area dimension, you have to put farm or agricultural area dimension, countryside dimension, peripheral dimension. All these things have come based on your literature review. You don't have to go and identify the statement, ask the judges to do the rating, everything. But the beauty of this method is this research work, this work will go as a complete research paper. And you see this Journal of Hospitality and Tourism Management. Okay, this in my opinion, this will be an international journal and a high impact journal. It will be having a rating of more than 5. So that means that simple literature review, you are able to publish a very good research paper because you applied a systematic literature review methodology. But only one problem which you will face it, you will not have access to these databases. Like the databases which are mentioned here, no? Science Direct, Scopus, Web of Science, Sage, Ibisco Host. But what you can do is, if you want to, if you are any Indian Institute of Management or any IIT is nearby your institute, you simply go there. You go to the IIT library or IIM library. Then you say that I want to use your library for 2 days. They will ask you some money. You pay 500 rupees per day. And if you go to the digital library section, you will be IITs and IIMs are having access to these databases. So you download, 2 days you sit there completely, and it will take a lot of time downloading now, like a searching and downloading each and every database. You have to go one by one. Then you download the papers, you copy all the papers in your pen drive, 2 or 3 days. You just spend 1,000 rupees or 1,500 rupees per 3 days. Then you will be getting a very good international paper, provided you know how to do the systematic review. So simply by doing literature review, you are publishing a research paper. So with this, I'll close my presentations. So any doubt? Because just I want to introduce the systematic review methodology. Any questions? Any questions or clarifications? So no questions from students? Yeah, somebody is asking, meta-analysis is also done in the same way and the same way. But let me tell you, the systematic review, meta-analysis, and several other methods are there. All are coming under the broad umbrella term called research synthesis. So the difference between methodology like a meta-analysis and systematic review is, in meta-analysis, you have to go for meta-analysis will be used only when you have sufficient number of research papers, published research papers, using some hypothesis testing tools. That means that you need the research papers, because in meta-analysis, what you will do is, you will be calculating the effect size. In meta-analysis, effect size is nothing but the strength of relationship between the variables. For example, if you are taking like a adoption, the factors determining the adoption of GMO crops, or not GMO crops, or maybe the salt tolerant rice varieties, or maybe any kind of Kadaknath breed. The factors determining the adoption of the Kadaknath breed. So you want to do the meta-analysis. Okay. So that means that you need the papers which are already published in the Kadaknath, on the Kadaknath, which have used some kind of hypothesis testing tools. Means hypothesis testing statistics like ANOVA, t-test, minimum requirement I'm telling, ANOVA, t-test, and maybe you can like a correlation and regression, and other quantitative research methods. Only when you have sufficient number of papers published in the same area which you want to do meta-analysis in the quantitative research method, then only you can go for meta-analysis. In meta-analysis, what you will do is, you will be collecting the values of F values, and then you will be collecting the correlation coefficient value, you will be collecting the regression value, you will be collecting the ANOVA value. All these value will be converting into some kind of coefficients. One coefficient is like a effect size. So they are actually indicating the strength of the relationship between the variables, the strength of the relationship between the education and adoption, the strength of the relationship between the scientific orientation and adoption. So that means that how scientific variation and adoption are linked to each other. So if the papers, you have sufficient number of papers published in this area, then you can go for meta-analysis. But systematic review is, you don't need that kind of data. You don't need to focus only on like hypothesis testing. Systematic is done predominantly in exploratory mode. In meta-analysis, you are going into explanation and prediction research goals. In case of systematic review, you are going in description and exploration. That I gave you I have shown you one example, no, like a rural tourism. Rural tourism, you are going there. They are trying to identify the meaning and the dimensions of the rural tourism as indicated in the previous research work. In the paper, they did not look into your F test value. They did not look into your correlation value. They did not look into the regression value. They have taken the thematic analysis, means by reading the content which is given in the previous literature, they identified the quotes, they identified the themes. This is a systematic review, is mostly a kind of a qualitative in nature, and meta-analysis is quantitative in nature. I think, hope you understood the difference between the systematic review and the meta-analysis. And please remember, meta-analysis is not a universal tool. You cannot simply do the meta-analysis. And please remember, there are a lot of confusions in meta-analysis. People think that meta-analysis is like a systematic review. No, systematic meta-analysis is like a systematic review, but it is not a systematic review. there is a clear-cut and distinct differences between the systematic review done with the thematic analysis and systematic review done with the meta-analysis. Okay, there is a clear-cut and distinct differences, and meta-analysis cannot be done in all cases. And it can be done only when if you are going into explanatory and prediction research goals. But in your systematic review can be done in a description and exploratory mode also. No problem. So any other questions?